Good morning. Hopefully you can hear all of us. Welcome again to our stakeholder meeting for the Fountain Master Transportation Plan. I'm Brady Williams, City Engineer for the City of Fountain. This project is being done in partnership with Wilson & Company. Thank you guys for helping us through this process. Most of the presentation is going to be done by Wilson this morning. I just wanted to thank you all for coming. Forward to your questions and your comments. As we did last time, we'll be sending out the PowerPoint after this meeting, and you'll see a slight change between the map that I sent you yesterday and the map that's presented after this meeting. We'll send that out as well so everybody has it. We just got some last minute comments, and at this time I'll turn the meeting over to Scott Escher. Thanks, Scott.
All right, thanks, Brandy. So again, welcome everybody. A couple things just with the webinar. We do want to make sure that people are able to ask questions. We have you should be able to type questions into the questions box in the GoToMeeting dashboard. There's also a chat function if there's an issue with anything that you can chat and send a chat, like if you're having problems hearing, things like that, and hopefully we can resolve that. If you want to ask specific questions live and in person and not type them in, please raise your hand and we will go through folks that have hands raised and unmute and then remute. So with that, hopefully everybody has access and is in, and we'll get rolling with stuff. So I'm gonna do this. So our agenda today, like I said, just sort of the welcome and ground rules that I just went through. We're gonna go through the Transportation Master Plan network that we've talked about, that we went through before, discuss the functional classifications, how those are changing and being updated for the master plan and with the city. Talk about the traffic forecast today for the 2045 land uses and how that's looking and how that compares with the original network of roads that are out there today versus what our new ones are and sort of our next steps. We have, just so people are aware, we have Kelly Friedel is going to be watching the questions and chat session to bring things to our attention if we need to and jump in as necessary. Maureen Arujo is going to do is really going to walk through the presentation overall. So she'll be running through that, and if there are questions or issues, or if she's going too fast, just let us know and we'll be able to slow things down and back it up. So we really do want to hear from everybody and hear what comments there are and if there's any issues or concerns with the network and the way things are going with this. So with that, I will turn it over to Maureen.
Okay, so Scott mentioned if I go too fast, I like to go fast. And I'll probably go through the whole presentation, then we can go back to slides and talk on the questions that Kelly will handle. So I want to refresh you of the context that we had gone over in our last meeting for development of the Fountain Transportation Master Plan Network. And so key elements are the El Paso County Major Transportation Corridors Plan, CDOT's functional classification, that's tied to funding, PPACG's RTP, and remember we talked about that's just funding that's reasonably available, so it doesn't cover all the needs, but we want to link in that, and that is also connected to funding that's available to through PPACG as an MPO. And then I am going to present, as Scott said, forecast growth. That is, it's based at this point on PPACG's land use forecast. They don't include the build out of development, which we will be looking at. So when you look at those, you'll probably see some volumes that look like they might be kind of low for that functional classification, but that's because we don't have all the development in there. What I want you to get from these forecast plots between the two networks is to show how the proposed network for the transportation master plan can distribute the traffic and work better in terms of connectivity. Next slide. So just a reminder on the major transportation corridors plan, I've kind of went through its value, but for the 2040 level, you'll see as it relates to Fountain, Squirrel Creek as a minor arterial, Mark Sheffel Expressway powers to State Highway 16, Mesa Ridge Parkway as an expressway, and then Old Pueblo Road and Hanover are collectors in this, and of course the freeway I-25. So these are all things that we want to work into the plan. Next slide. And El Paso County has taken a look like we will be doing for the transportation master plan at corridor preservation. So kind of looking at a more robust bus forecast, perhaps a build out of development. And you'll see that more corridors come to play. For example, the extension of Meridian Road south to Squirrel Creek, the extension of Curtis Road to connect to Bradley and Drennan, and the role of Peyton Highway is something they want to upgrade, and Powers Boulevard, very important, that connection. So next slide. So this is the funding piece. CDOT and the feds really have set up a classification system, functional classification. So the roadways that fit into these categories could be eligible through PPACG for funding as local agency projects. Next slide. And we talked about this before. This is PPACG's current 2045 fiscally constrained network. So you see that it's pretty sparse. And we talked about before, because of that, Link Road is, you'll see in the forecast, is carrying way more traffic. It has a big burden. And there's not good east-west connectivity. Other things to keep in mind. Next slide. So here's the northernmost portion of our network that we have for the transportation master plan. And you see that Fountain has developed 7 functional classifications in the legend. You'll see, so the freeway would be I-25, the orange expressway, so that's going to be State Highway 21 Powers, Mesa Ridge Parkway. And you'll see that we are showing, as the county did, the extension of Powers Boulevard to the south. And then the blue are the major arterials, and light blue arterials. And this is a little bit different from what Scott's pointing at right now. This is a little bit different than what the county had, because we talked about that connection. With the extension of Mesa Ridge as a principal arterial to the east, and its connection with an interchange shown by the white colored star. And I should probably point out on this, those white colored stars are new, would be new grade separated interchanges. And then where you see kind of like brackets, that denotes kind of a symbolic bridge in that there's not a connection to powers at those locations. So anyways, with the connection, we think that Mark Sheffel would have less emphasis to the south. You'll also see on this slide from Cross Creek to the south to CNS Road, there's a gray a collector, minor collector. So in this network, we're reflecting what we think we need to add for connectivity, but also what we know that are in areas that were annexed, that were in ODPs for some of the developments, not all. Next slide. So there's some more of this with the ranch development that is north of Squirrel Creek, south of Mesa Ridge. So these are arterials that they're proposing. And if you think back about what we showed last time, Link Road and Squirrel Creek were very heavily burdened because it was the only way to connect to the regional network. So these arterials that they are proposing and are part of the network are important for that. And you'll see we have an interchange for Powers at Squirrel Creek. And we have that arterial that goes through the ranch, extending through Cane Ranch. And I guess we can go to the next slide. Oh, wait a minute. Let me first comment on the east-west connections. So Squirrel Creek, all these, we put the aerial on the back, and so, you know, and maybe you know the area. So not all these roads exist. So Squirrel Creek actually today ends pretty much at Link Road. There's a section through the residential area here. So this would be a new connection moving west to Comanche Village Drive. It's not a wonderful place with the floodplain, the Jimmy Camp Creek crossing there, but I guess when you look at these networks, think about these as schematic. It could move north, but we'll have to see what works best. We did want to have it connected to Squirrel Creek. Then moving south, Cane Road is connected using REA, and Ohio. But Ohio is a lower classification, a collector in the CBD, reflecting its function. And you'll see a project the city has going now. Indiana would replace the crossing of the railroad. That's at Iowa.
Illinois.
Excuse me. I keep saying Iowa, get my states mixed up. So, and then light blue across, this doesn't have a connection to Powers. This is where some segments of Wilson Road exist. And so that would actually replace the connection of Link Road to Old Pueblo Road. It does not have a connection, direct connection to Powers, but it gives some east-west connectivity. So next slide. And you see that same Wilson Road connector at the north end of this one. And then you see that extension of that arterial from the Cane Ranch and the ranch becoming a loop with an interchange at Powers and a new interchange at I-25. This is the interchange we talked about last time. Its location is just north of where the park that goes along I-25 south. It's a linear park, so that we're not into 4F on that. The other connectors to that have interchange with Powers to Old Pueblo Road, those you can think of those as conceptual. That's not necessarily exactly where they'll be. And of course, Powers Boulevard, its alignment will be determined by the PEL that the county's doing. And you see a dark colored star at I-25. That's an existing interchange that would have to be upgraded, rebuilt, reconstructed, whatever. So next slide. And this slide just shows, and I think Brandy sent out PDFs so that you can see these in more detail to the participants, but this just shows the whole thing together so you can see where those interchanges are. I do want to call attention to the fact that what was sent out to you, we didn't have the northern part of Powers south of Mark Steffel in the correct alignment. So it's actually kind of along the section line there. So we'll send you out new ones. Next slide. Might have to scoop this up because not showing it all, but this is showing what these six classifications that Fountain is putting in place, kind of the characteristics that we're looking at. Oh, I know I'm not showing freeway, that's why. So the expressway, if you look at the speeds, the second number would be the posted speed. the design speed being the first number on the speed row, the top row. And then we're showing some ADTs just to get a feeling of what the ADT suggested for those would be, but obviously there are other factors in terms of the cross-section of the roadway that make it appropriate functionally, access and so on. And then the right-of-way width, pavement width, number of lanes. And we're going to send out these slides, right, so they can see this in more detail. Yes. And there's more detail about sidewalks, bicycle lanes, utility corridors, parking, and so on for them. So I'm not going to read it all to you. You can look at it, but you can see this is what we were thinking as we identified what the classifications would be in the network. I guess one pertinent thing is the access spacing. So all the arterial classes are half-mile spacing, and without a criteria on the collector or minor collector, and 1 mile on the expressway. Next slide. So here I just want to contrast. You remember the last meeting that we had, we talked a little bit about how this was just crazy. This network was, even if we looked at the PPACG socioeconomic forecast, which they explained that they're going to do a bottom-up approach and get more, from the locals that really know what's happening in terms of development from the planning departments. And generally, they're probably very low in this area. But even with that, you'll see that Link Road is one I mentioned. We've got between Link Road and Squirrel Creek 27,000 ADT, which is huge. And then we have very big volumes on Mesa Ridge because it's really the only connection in this area that goes to full east-west. So that's what we had with PPACG's fiscally constrained network. Next slide. And that's in the north part. So here I'm showing you the master plan network, same kind of area, a lot more roadways. And just want to call your attention to the fact that Powers Boulevard is picking up traffic. Also, these arterials through the ranch are picking up some traffic. And it is acting as a significant reliever to Link and Squirrel Creek in this area. And again, you'll see the CNS Road and Mark Shuffle that we talked about, including the Mark Shuffle downgrade to arterial. They're picking up less because there's a way to not use that intersection that's would be a bottleneck at Link and CNS. And the connection that the city has built from CNS Duckwood is picking up traffic. I think the scale is small, but additionally, the Comanche Village Drive would pick up traffic. So everything's loading. And you'll see that Powers drops as we move south from 36 to 30,000. You'll see that the arterial extended from the ranch is picking up significant traffic. And it's all looking a lot better in terms of distribution. Caution is that when I get to next steps, we're going to look at a significant revision to reflect development build out in the forecast in this area. So areas that, for example, look like they're pretty low volumes for the classification. Let's just take Squirrel Creek between that arterial and Powers Boulevard, 7,800. Why does that have to be a major arterial? Well, the development plans are probably commercial in that area, and you have direct connection to the north-south as well as Powers Boulevard. Once we get all that land use in there, there's going to be significantly more volume, particularly in that piece that's in between those two routes that distribute traffic north and south. Next slide. So this is looking at the same thing, the PPACG network and forecasts in the south. So you see the I-25 at 55.8 and Old Pueblo Road 4,000 in Hanover 1,300. Next slide. So here Probably should have put the one on that loop, but here you can see more distribution of that traffic. So, next slide. Okay, just to let you know where we're going to go from here. So we're going to be evaluating the carrying capacity of the proposed transportation master plan network. We're going to use that to help create a funding framework. So we'll know the cost to build links that don't exist, the cost to widen, and actually I don't have the right bullets under this. Anyways, here we'll be looking at what we know from the ODPs and look at reasonable adjacent, nearest neighbor or in the county densities that we expect, and we'll redo the forecast that I just showed you. I apologize that I didn't fix these bullets. And then we'll develop cost estimates, as I was starting to say, for the roadway improvements. And those will feed into creating the funding framework. So you know that the city of Fountain approved an impact fee. They're not part of PPRTA, so that's something they're trying to do. So the information from the Transportation Master Plan will feed into that to help them flesh that out more. At this point, I think it's my understanding that they have pretty much put in place kind of the same criteria that El Paso County has, but they know that City of Fountain is unique, and so this plan will help inform that, change it. And they'll also look at diversifying funding opportunities if there's state and federal opportunities. And of course, with the funding, prioritizing. So that's what I have. I think. Next slide. It's just the contact information we sent before, and we will send out the slides. And I will fix those bullets. Sorry about that.
Maureen, we've got a few questions and hands up, so we'll just go through those one by one now. Okay. If you have a question that you want to type in the box, please go ahead and do so. As we're going through these, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. The first hand, and I apologize, I don't see a full name. Jay, did you have a question? I think you're muted. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Well, while he or she is figuring that out, Scott can move to slides if there's a slide that you are interested in looking at.
Okay. Next question, what does ADT mean?
Average daily traffic. So that is the two-way traffic for the entire 24 hours, and it's averaged. Since I was using the PPACG model and adjusted that for model performance, that would represent a weekday versus an annual. So if it was ADT, it would be average annual.
Okay, great. Next question. On the southern section of Powers, why do the minor arterials not continue to the east?
So I assume you're talking about the green ones. They could. The volume, if you looked at the volume, and maybe when we get through doing the build out forecast, that'll be something that we need to do additionally, but the volumes on Meridian South are smaller. So it kind of depends on what's needed to serve that large area. If you can, Scott, go. Yeah.
Yeah. And we do know that in that area too, there's some solar farms in the area that are being considered as well. So we're working through a couple of those things to see if there's really a benefit to extending those or not. some of that also will determine that final, I guess, southern alignment of the powers corridor, of how far east that may go. Because like I said, we got solar farms right here that these would sort of go right into potentially if we continue them all the way to Meridian. We also have some topography issues, that there's a big ridge right in this area that maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. So there's a few things there that we've still sort of been looking at and considering. But at this point, if there's not a lot of potential for development out there, it might not really necessitate extending those further east.
And this is probably a little lame, but but it reminds me of this question that I forgot to point out, that on these maps we did show the City of Fountain municipal boundaries, and so that area that you're talking about is in the county. So that would probably really be something that they would explore in the major transportation corridor plan. So not precluded.
And I think, Maureen, I think she clarifies additionally, seems like the light blue arterial roadway in the southern section should be a higher classification as it ties into I-25.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something.
I guess I would say that that is possible when we get into doing the carrying capacity analysis with development build out. Right now, the volumes are not huge.
Okay.
Okay.
Next question, I'm going to go to a hand. I think Greg Lauer, you were next in. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, did I do it right?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yep.
Yay, for better or worse, I guess. You'll determine in just a second. And maybe this is a silly question because I just don't know enough about how these models are derived, but when those average daily traffic models are being put together, does that take into account the different types of traffic, meaning cars versus trucks, or is that even necessary to factor at this point?
Nope, that's not a crazy question at all. Yes, it does. PPACG's model actually has a separate truck model, and the volumes are added together to get those. The reason the truck model is separate is that trucks usually take the shortest route, whereas cars may divert based on congestion. So.
Okay, hey, thank you.
Math of the model.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, great. And then next, Audrey.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you, go ahead.
Okay, if you go to the Mesa Ridge Parkway and I-25 connection, and you look at the Bandley Drive, I own many lots along Bandley Drive going south, and it's shown here as a minor arterial, but my understanding is that it's going to be changed to a collector because we don't have the right-of-way width and we don't have as much traffic as we had initially thought we would along that. And so I expected that to be shown in yellow, just like the road going north, Bandley Drive north, exit 132, is a collector. Can you speak to that? Is that going to be changed?
So the reason that it's shown as a minor arterial is because of the connectivity to the signals on both the north and south, and the role as a frontage road in connection with I-25 as well. The northern section at this point, and maybe for a long time because of the creek, is ends in a cul-de-sac. So it doesn't have that connectivity. That was the reason for showing that as the collector. Much as
okay, so I'd like you to take a look at that again, if you would. I think if you look at the right-of-ways, you don't have that kind of a right-of-way, either across the bridge that takes you from the first part of Bandley Drive into the section that goes into KOA. That's 2-lane, and if you look at the width, even the widest width that we can get between the I-25 frontage, the I-25 fence and ownership, and the actual right-of-way itself is something like 70, 75 feet. So you don't have the room to be able to widen that anymore, and you can't widen on the I-25 side past where their fence is. So we've gone out there because we're doing work along there and have measured in multiple different places in terms of width. And so can you take a look at that?
Well, as I mentioned, as we look at the carrying capacities, we may be revising some of these. Now, when you say additional lanes, that if you look at the functional classification criteria for the minor, well, it actually does show it as 4. Never mind.
Yeah, and you don't have room for that. So the widest that you can get are 2 lanes, north and south, and then a middle left turn in lane. And that road only has development, as you know, on one side of the road because it butts right up against I-25. And if you look at the south connection to Bandley Drive, it goes through, that little jog that shows on your map. It goes through of a residential area and then jogs back down to State Highway 85, and then it connects to I-25. So it's a very small, narrow 2-lane connection, and really can't be. It doesn't make sense financially to be any wider in that area. And you have homes on both sides as you go through that area, and then it doesn't connect to I-25. It connects to State Highway 85, which then connects to I-25. So I'm just asking that my understanding from the city, and Brandy, you can speak to this, we've been dealing with this, is that it falls under the classification, or in terms of width and traffic, of a collector. Before it had been envisioned as a minor arterial, but now based on development that's happening and based on right-of-way, widths and everything else, that it's going to be shown instead as a collector, just as Bandley Drive North is. So if Brandy, could you speak to that?
Yeah, Audrey, I'll just say we're still looking at it. I don't think we've made any decisions yet. That's the point of this meeting. So we're still gathering information. So we can take that into consideration as we're looking at our cross sections in relation to part of the city.
Okay, great. Because I can provide, if I need to provide additional data on that development in my section, which is quite a bit of that, Lee Scott Cleary did the traffic study for me and has updated it, as you know, several times. And it seems to fall much more, it does, into the collector thing. So I would really appreciate you looking at that. And if we could look at that together, I would also appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, we can take a look at that, Audrey. And one thing I will caution is that just because existing right-of-ways aren't there for current, the proposed functional classifications of roadways, doesn't mean that that the need isn't there and the desire isn't to have a higher classification of roadway. That happens many places throughout this network, where the existing facility is a 2-lane road and a smaller right-of-way. However, the need in the plan is to actually expand those roadway systems. So that is something also that we're looking at the need for and considering for Bandley as well, because of the type of facility that it is. So that is something that we're taking into consideration and looking at as well.
Okay, I just would like to be included in with Brandy and you as you look at that, so that I could bring in what I know about the development along there. And there's going to be very little development in the southern part of that connection because it's all in floodway. And so a whole section as you're going south toward that residential area could never be built on. You're right at the topography, the creek itself. And so what has been developed down to what used to be the apple plant is pretty much, there's very little left going south after that could be developed. And so you're looking at a long road there, but the actual development area is not that big, and there is not room for the right-of-way unless you take considerable amount of existing KOA, or you take a whole row off of KOA, you take a whole section off of the industrial as you go south. We had already donated 10 feet all along our southern property, and we're in the process of doing that on the property south of the bridge. But you still don't have, you can't get any more right away to be able to accommodate your classification of minor arterial. But anyway, I would.
Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like moving forward, as I've described from a technical standpoint, we're going to look at carrying capacity forecasts and determine connectivity, and we'll probably be refining. And the developer landowner would like to be engaged in that analysis as we move forward and provide us additional information.
Yes, whatever you need, I'd be happy to provide.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next question. Is there a trigger point in which Squirrel Creek Road will need to be built over Jimmy Camp Creek?
Well, from a technical, standpoint of the volumes, there certainly would be, but there's funding, and when the funding gets there in place, so that is part of what I described as the prioritization and implementation plan. So I know that's a pretty vague answer, but there's a lot of factors involved, and we just want to make sure that the option is preserved so that that can happen.
Yeah, and I think, and I'll just add into that is like Maureen said, yes, there is sort of a trigger point, but a lot of that, like you said, it's going to be part of the implementation plan. That's a big investment for that connection across right now, that we need to figure out how that plays into the funding scenarios, as well as the other connections as you get that all the way through there. So that is something that we're considering and looking at how that all works.
Yeah, and I would say that the plan is going to probably do some initial analysis there and nail down where we would like to preserve the right of way, which might not be exactly where it's shown.
Correct.
Okay, the next question here, and I see a bunch of hands still up. I'm glad it's not real hands and just virtual hands, or you'd be holding them for all the time. Trying to go in order here. Will Link Road not connect directly to Wilson?
So I'll take this one, Maureen. At this point, what we've looked at doing is actually having Link Road end at Jimmy Camp and tie into Jimmy Camp, with Wilson Road being the major east-west connection. We've looked at a couple different opportunities and options for how that could potentially connect to Wilson if we wanted to. And at this stage, we're, the way Wilson and Link connect right now, it's very convoluted and it's right by the railroad crossing. So we wanted to try and separate those a little bit. And that's why we've sort of modified the network as such. So I guess short answer is no. Currently, we have it showing not connecting directly to Wilson Road.
The only thing I would add is we kind of have a goal of having only one railroad crossing.
Mm-hmm.
And it is possible that Link Road could be rerouted so that it connects. Correct. Maybe on the other side of the irrigation dish, but
something
like that.
Yeah.
Okay, next question will go over to you, Tim Roberts. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, I have just a couple, one easy question and then a comment. What's the distance between the Mesa Road and Powers interchange and I think it was Squirrel Creek interchange?
So,
Scale down there.
yeah, so between Mesa
Several
Ridge,
miles.
yeah, between Mesa Ridge and Squirrel Creek is about 2 miles actually, just under, I think.
Well, I think it's a little longer than that.
Is it?
But Tim, we can measure it and tell you. There's a scale at the bottom.
But no, I don't need exact. I was just.
But I wonder if you might be going at why, because an interchange was proposed at one time at Mark Sheppel, and there's some problems there with the creek and so on. So yeah,
Okay.
that was part of our thinking.
Okay. The reason I ask is when you go that far apart, then you start putting more of the burden on the local system. So as you know, but sounds like there's
right.
topographical.
So and
issues
it's not out of the question, but it is something that we looked at not doing.
And is there in your future? It sounds like you have more analysis you're going to conduct. Would there be opportunity to either make to reconsider that or change alignments to accommodate it or anything like that?
Well, the county's doing a PEL for Powers, and so these are just fountain's guess. But I would say, as far as changing the alignment between Squirrel Creek and Mesa Ridge, that's getting kind of solidified in the development plans and annexation plans. So that piece of the alignment may be fixed.
Okay.
Where we have interchange is probably not.
Okay. And then an observation, you guys didn't have bike facilities on collector streets. And in the city, we find that those, and through our bike master plan and our studies, we find that the collector streets actually are one of the better streets to have bike facilities on. So you may want to, because it provide really, it's a low volume and there's a lot of collector streets providing connectivity. So when you look at utilization and all that might be something to consider.
Yeah, Tim, I can take that one for you. We haven't actually figured out how to write that correctly because we have the bike lanes on one of the collectors that has the parking, and then we have what we're calling a multi-use shoulder on the other. There's no parking allowed on that, but that doesn't preclude you from pulling over if your car breaks. So we have bike lanes on both of them. We just wanted to make sure we double count it when people were looking at the street classification, thinking that the street was 12 feet wider than it actually was. So our multi-use shoulder, we're going to use as a bike lane, and then on the other classification, the bike lane is specifically called out. So that's why it doesn't look like we have bike lanes, but we really do. We just didn't want people to get confused with the pavement mat that we put down. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep, I got it. Yep. And that was it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Next up, Richard Applegate has a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Richard. If you're talking, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
There, finally got it to unmute.
There we go.
Okay. The question I had was on Link and Mark Shuffle, especially those numbers that you were giving us for daily traffic. Do those take into account at all some of the future build outs that are proposed for those areas?
They do not. They are based on the PPACG forecast, which we know are low. That's why in the next steps, I said we're going to be going traffic analysis zone by traffic analysis zone and putting in there what can reasonably be expected to occur with build out. Now,
Okay. And
We're
we know
kind of
Link will,
familiar because it's coming in now with the ranch. We're more familiar with that. And we do know that some of the development that is being proposed in that area is included in PPACG's forecast, but not all of it.
is that on Marsh Shuffle?
It is, Scott, do you want to show with your pointer?
So, yeah, so the ranch
Link.
development is this area here. Oh, sorry. I was pointing
can't
at the
see
wrong map. I was pointing at the wrong screen. That's why. So that's this area here is sort of where the ranch development is going in, right, or is being proposed. The one thing I would like to do too is when you look at this is the 2045 network with no changes, right? So the existing what's there, and you can see that there is a lot of volume on Link and on CNS and on Mark Shuffle as you go through here, right? Because there's just no options for traffic to really get around. And what we're trying to show is that when you start to add additional network connectivity, and really specifically the Powers Boulevard connection, it really relieves a lot of the traffic load on Link and Squirrel Creek and CNS, Mark Shuffle, that general area. Now we know that right now, as Maureen had said, it doesn't have all the development built into this network, so we know these numbers are a little bit lower. However, I think the really the takeaway is to show that with the different connections, it really does help to distribute the traffic more, so it's not as heavy to Link Road, to Squirrel Creek as it currently is and has to be, because there's no additional or no other options. So, but these numbers here in the master plan network will be refined and revised to make sure that we have all the proposed developments in there to really show what all those numbers truly will be with all the development built into it.
And help us to see that we have the right functional class.
Correct.
Like we had the discussion about Banley Road, maybe we don't have that much traffic on there. Maybe it could be a collector, we'll have to see.
But Mark Shuffle going north where it becomes county, but there's a lot of fountain along that road. There's a lot of proposed build out and a lot of thought of what they're going to do there. And it is only a 2-lane road, which a lot of us argued that was a mistake when they first redid it, because they decided there was no traffic, so make it a 2-lane. So they replaced a 2-lane with a 2-lane. And we kind of argued about that quite a bit down here because that's a good road for fountain people to go north.
I think that 2-lane to the 2-lane is a phase, because if you look at the county's major transportation corridor plan, that is supposed to be a 4-lane and it's supposed to be an expressway.
Right. What we were arguing about is cost. What it would have cost to go ahead and make it a 4 rather than go back later and completely widen the road was ridiculous. We didn't understand it, but there will be a lot more traffic on that road.
There will.
And it carries a lot of fountain people north. We go that way because it's one of the easiest accesses to the north and the center of town.
Yep.
Right.
So I was just wanting other numbers.
Factor that in. So yeah.
Okay.
And once we get all the development in there, I'm sure that 15.5 that you see there is going to go way up. So
yeah. Well, that'll double or more. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up with a hand, Gordon Rick. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Ask away.
Okay, so a little bit of a different question concerning railroad crossings. In Fountain, we have essentially 5 railroad crossings: Mesa Ridge Parkway, Duckway, Comanche Village, Ohio, and I'm combining Illinois and Link into one connection because it's simpler that way. The problem that we have is that occasionally, and this happens like once a year for like a month or 2 at a time, all of a sudden trains stop and block 4 of the 5 crossways. The only one that's raised is Mesa Ridge Parkway. Duckwood, Comanche Village, Ohio, and Illinois Link are all at ground level. So essentially, anybody trying to get to 85, 87, I-25 is essentially stopped and funneled all the way north to Mesa Ridge Parkway to get across the railroad. My question is, have we or can we look at adding a raised crossing somewhere, preferably in the south of Fountain, to try and allow more crossings? I know you said earlier you didn't want to add crossings to the existing railroad, and I understand that and agree with it. That's why I'm asking about a raised crossing.
Yeah, the other part of my answer was that we didn't want to have 2 crossings of Wilson and Link, but we did think it was a good goal to grade separate the Wilson crossing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where I was going to jump in. I was going to say one thing that we're actually looking at, because we think it makes some sense, is this, you know, where Wilson and or Link exist over the railroad. We're looking at the option there of truly making that a grade separation ultimately, because it's something we're trying to figure out from a geometric standpoint. Can we make that work with the grades and with the existing properties that have access to Link in that area? Because we recognize that as well, is that you only have that if the trains do stop, you have no way to get across without that. Now, I think we all recognize as well is that there's really no opportunity to do, you know, any grade separated crossings between Duckwood and, you know, and Indiana at this point, just because of the proximity of the railroad, properties.
Yeah,
but we are looking at that, yes.
Okay. And then second, you said on the Squirrel Creek extension across Fountain Creek, you haven't looked at funding yet. Is that correct?
Correct. We haven't looked at funding specifically. That's going to be part of when we start developing the cost for the different improvements, for all the different improvements of what does that really look like, and then what are the funding opportunities or options to be able to fund any of these projects, and that one in particular.
Okay, yeah, that
and
one.
the eastern part, what I also said is the eastern part to the west of Link. We're not sure if it would be there. It might move further north.
Yeah, and that wherever it moves is fine. I understand the situation. I just want to make sure we understand the funding challenges and have a plan to deal with them before we include it in the final version of the plan. What I'd hate to do is say, okay, here's the plan, and we've got no way to fund it, and you know, we're standing there going, well, that's not going to work. Where are we going to go from here? How do we get back?
And I'm going to jump in on that one a little bit, Commissioner Rick. I wish that I could just write down that we have funding for all of these.
Oh, I know you do, dear.
And I know that you know that I'm working as hard as I can to get funding.
I do know that.
It's almost 2 sides of the same coin. If we don't have it on a document, then nobody knows we want it, and they don't know we're looking for money. So on some of these, we're going to have money and we have a plan. On some of them, they actually have to make it to a plan like this for anyone to consider funding them. So I just want you to understand that we're not putting it on the list as kind of a quote unquote slap in the face. Like, this is a great idea. We don't have any money for it, but we need to have it on a plan like this. And that's why the counties and CDOT are going through the PEL process to really show the need for the roads and paint a picture of where we're headed. So hopefully that as the years go by, we can put funding in place. So I don't want you to think that it's complete pie in the sky. It's kind of a balance. But if we don't show the need with this document that Wilson and Company is putting together, it's much harder to get funding for these roads.
That's a fair point, Brandy. I do appreciate all the hard work you're doing to try and get us funding. Thank you for all of your efforts. And we'll see where it goes from there. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you for your question. Next, back into the chat. The next question, can we assume that intersections that are not starred on powers are at grade signalized intersections?
I'm going to answer that one as no. If it's not for anything on powers, what we're trying to show is that we have grade separations on there, so that the only places that powers will have access in the ultimate configuration is going to be at the starred interchange locations. However, is there opportunity for phasing it in similar to the way powers was done through Colorado Springs, where you build it, have at-grade intersections with an ultimate grade separation in the future? That is something that could be considered as we look at phasing and implementation. But the intent is not to have any at-grade intersections on Powers Boulevard at full build out.
Okay, great. Next question, is Link Road near Old Pueblo Road currently classified as a minor arterial or a collector?
Scott, I think you have to go back to the PPACG network to see that, or the CDOT
Okay.
one.
Let's see.
So CDOT is classifying it. Oh, you had it. Go to that one, the CDOT one. CDOT is classifying it as a minor arterial.
Okay. Next question. Mark Shuffle to the north of Bradley is shown as an expressway. I wonder if it should continue as an expressway to create another ring road to complement Powers. Just a thought.
I'm going to ask Tucker for a little bit of clarification. So do you mean as it's coming south? And I know you can either unmute or we can do the chat. I just want to make sure I understand that you mean coming through the city of Fountain, it should be increased to the same classification. I'll make that assumption and you can correct me if I'm wrong. The reason that it's staying at that classification is because, as you can see on this map, as you get further into Fountain, I've got homes on either side of that road. And the likelihood of me tearing down those homes is very small. I would say if we had gone through this exercise 40 years ago, I think that would have been a different conversation. There still may be a day where Fountain grows to the point that all those homes are torn down and they turn into apartments. I don't know that, but I don't think I'm personally ready to put the city through that in the next 40 years. So I'm going to guess that that was your question. And yes, we've looked at that, but again, sending all of that traffic to 85, 87 is not really a goal we were trying to achieve. We'd much rather get the traffic to Powers, get the traffic to I-25, because eventually in our own crystal ball, we're looking at a swap, much to what Colorado Springs did with Academy and Powers, is kind of taking 85, 87, making that more of a local road that the city of Fountain is in control of, and graciously giving you guys Powers Boulevard. So we still don't particularly want to send all that traffic to 85, 87. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, to go further west. Brandy, if I could add, just dovetailing with the question that Tim Roberts had. So if the PEL for Powers would determine that Mark Shuffle was the location for an interchange, perhaps that classification could be extended. Yeah.
Just to Powers.
Right.
And then downgrade it west of Powers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that makes sense. We just don't know the answer at this very moment.
Okay, and Brandy Pepper has actually stepped out of the meeting, so potentially we can reach out to her directly. I just, for the benefit of the group, I wanted to continue with her questions.
Thanks, Kelly.
The next question on the list, will Bradley at Powers extend to the west?
Good question. And I guess that's, since that area up there is definitely outside of the city of Fountain, we haven't considered that. I think that that it's in that it does connect to the west as part of the county's network.
I think so too, that the county had a connection. I'm not sure who's here from the county on that.
I know Victoria's on the call.
Yeah, Victoria, okay. I will unmute you if you want to jump in.
And it could be in the city, I'm not sure which, but my plot shows further north, but we didn't really do anything with the areas that were outside of the jurisdiction.
Yeah.
This is Victoria.
Hey, Victoria.
Hey, glad you can hear me. Yes, we do have it shown on the major transportation corridor plan as being a connection, so that we do sort of have a little loop there that connects out all the way to Curtis Road, and then it connects all the way up north to Briargate Stapleton. So that's going to be a planned link for the county to have a loop around Springs.
Right. So that was entirely my bad that I didn't edit the PPACG network. Sorry about that. But again, not concentrating on areas outside of the city.
Okay.
The next question, and what potentially could be the last question, when will this be adopted and when will the development TISs need to reflect this?
All right, I'll jump in on that one. Our goal is to have a draft by the end of February. We'll look over that internally and take it to City Council in March. And I would say a final draft, I'm gonna give it May, just in case anything blows up between now and then, but hopefully by the end of May, we'll have this adopted and ready for the various agencies and engineers to reference as we move forward with the rest of 2021.
Okay, and then the follow-up to that, will the development TISs, when will the development TISs need to reflect this, as soon as it's adopted?
Yeah, after it's adopted.
Great. And we do have one more question and one more hand, so we'll keep going. I would recommend that the Wilson Road and Powers Boulevard intersection be developed, preserving the right-of-way for a future full interchange, even if the initial build is only a grade-separated overpass. Otherwise, you are completely dependent on future development further south to bring in another interchange to feed the south side of Fountain.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's something that I think we want to take a look at and verify that we don't need one there, because I think that's a valid point that we need to consider.
Okay. And Sharon Thompson has a question. I will unmute you. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Sharon, are you there?
Unmuted. We can't hear you.
Do we need to give some assistance of where the menu is to do that?
No, she's unmuted. I'm wondering if it's something that the microphone on her computer isn't working or something. Shoot.
Okay, Sharon, why don't you try and type your question into the question box or the chat box, either way, and I'll speak for you. So, Maureen, while Sharon is doing that, do you have any last comments or conclusions?
I guess I would just say this has been great input, and it'll be very helpful as we move into the capacity analysis stage and looking at some of these things, the functional classifications and the intersections and interchanges.
Okay, Scott?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for their time, their comments. It is an important plan for the city, and we want to make sure we're listening to everybody and understanding all the different challenges that are there, so we develop the best plan possible to keep moving forward. I know that the city wants this plan to be very usable and an achievable plan, so it doesn't just sit on the shelf not doing anything. So I know that the efforts will be used here, and your input will be considered as we go through finalizing. And so thank you everybody for attending, for being part of this and being part of the process. These planning projects and planning processes are only as good as the participation we get from the stakeholders, and so we really do appreciate this. So things aren't done in a vacuum. So with that, Brandy, any last comments?
Yeah. So we're going to put the slides together, and then I'll send those out. We're going to put the most recent map together, and then I'll send that out. Sharon, I don't know how we're going to answer your question, but you can always send me an email or call me after this meeting, since I have no doubt you have a question. We just can't get it so we can hear you. Sorry about that. And again, when I send out the other information, if you have any questions, any comment, something you didn't want to say in this meeting, just feel free to send me an email and we can talk through it and talk it out. We really just want to make sure everybody understands what we're thinking. By no means have we thought about everything. If somebody knows something we don't know that's coming, let us know so we can incorporate it. And then for those council members that are on, our goal is to bring this to you guys in March and get your input at that point in time. Somehow I don't think we'll be doing that in person, so we're going to have to do this again, but at least at that point in time, Lisa can take care of making sure everybody's on and off and coordinating all of that. Again, our apologies to Councilmember Thompson. That's all I've got. Scott? Wait, another question, Kelly. Is that a question or a statement? Can you read the...
It just says, thank you for the time and information given to the community. Look forward to the updated slides, and thanks for all your hard work.
Thanks, Kelly.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
All right. I think that's it if there's no further questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. And we look forward to talking in the future. At this point, we're going to end the presentation and go on our merry ways. Have a great rest of your week.
Okay, now you have to make sure you stop recording and don't just disappear.
I know, that's what I'm trying to. Where the heck did that button go?
I can see it here. It's at the top where it says sharing. Can I stop the recording?
Where is it?
Right.
Stop screen. That